When I'm canning, I use two different kinds of lids. I have both the basic canning lid and my reusable lids. Now, I love the basic one, except I don't like buying it over and over again and then throwing it in the landfill afterwards. The reusable lids are super great, but they have to be treated just a little bit differently. It's been interesting to me to talk to people who do canning regularly to find out just how many of them didn't even realize that reusable canning lids were an option. A couple years ago, we had so much difficulty finding the standard lids that's when I actually started buying the reusable ones, and it's kind of great. I still have way too much canning to do to stick with the reusable ones all the time. And for my videos, I have to admit I do these ones, but that's because I don't want to throw anybody off with these. The basic canning lid is made of metal, and it has a little rubber gasket kind of painted on around the edge. Whereas the reusable one is made of plastic, and it has a little rubber gasket that you actually put onto it. One of the nice things about this is that as the rubber gasket fails, you can just get a new one. You don't have to get the entire thing. What I'd like to do is walk you through step by step how you use the reusable canning lids. And I have some nice colored water here. My kids were like, "Ooh, what is that?" I think they were hoping it was Kool-Aid or something, but it's just water for our purposes. The very first step is to actually place the gaskets and the lids in water and allow them to simmer on the stove while you're preparing your food. Once I have my jar prepared for canning, then I'll remove it from off the stove. I'll use tongs to remove my lid, and I don't touch the bottom part of it. And then I remove the gasket. And I look at the gasket just to make sure that there's no grooves from where it's sealed against a jar previously. If there is, then I want those to go against this part as opposed to against the jar. Then I hold it all together, place it on my jar, and I'll place my ring on it, fingertip tight. And the way to tell what fingertip tight is for this is to just put your finger in the middle and turn gently. As soon as it starts turning on the countertop, then you know that it's good to go. So you want to do this on a smooth surface. One of the key reasons why people will have trouble with this sealing is that they actually make it too tight, and it needs to be loose enough to allow that air out so that it can make the vacuum on the inside. I also tend to leave just a little bit bigger headspace than I normally would. It seems to be successful for me. Then I would place it in my boiling water bath. Of course, it's not boiling right now. It is hot water, but... And I would put it on the stove for just the regular amount of time, whatever the recipe sets for. Then once the processing is complete, I would go ahead and take off the lid, turn off the heat, and give it 5 minutes to cool down. After the 5 minutes, I would come and remove my jar, placing it on a heat-resistant surface. And then I would let it sit for another 3 to 5 minutes. This is just so that it can cool and any residual air that's going to escape will escape. And then I would use a cloth to hold on to the jar and tighten it down as much as I can. And what that does is that pushes that gasket really firmly against the glass jar. And then it's super important that you allow this to rest for 24 hours on the counter before you remove the ring. And you can either leave the ring on it or take it off. The good thing about this is you don't have to worry about it rusting to the lid. After the 24 hours are complete, you should be able to actually lift your jar just by hanging on to the lid portion. And if you can do that and it doesn't separate, then you know it has a good seal. So this is some roasted sweet pepper spread that I made a couple of years ago, and I'm gonna go ahead and show you how you take care of it at this point. So the first thing I wanna show you is that you can actually write on the lid. I write on it with a Sharpie. And then one of the ways that you can remove that Sharpie so that you can write on it again without any confusion of what's what is just using a little bit of rubbing alcohol. A permanent marker is only so permanent. Sometimes it takes a couple of rubs to get it off. Using a little magic eraser with it can help too. So that's nice because then you can write on it and not have to worry about it. The next thing I want to show you is how you remove it, because if you try to remove it with a normal can opener, you can sometimes do it, but sometimes that lip just isn't enough. So what they actually recommend is to use a butter knife, not a sharp knife. If you do, then you can cut your gasket. But if you use just a butter knife and slide it in, you can push right against that gasket and it releases the seal. And this is that little line that I was talking about, where if it still shows up later, then you'd want to make sure that you turn it the other way. Usually what I've found is that it just pops right out of it after I've washed it. So yay, now I get to eat roasted sweet pepper spread today. The other thing that I've found really helpful is that sometimes it seems like after a certain number of years, these start to feel a little bit more brittle. So what I do is at the end of the season, or just if I notice that they're looking a little bit dry, I take a little bit of petroleum jelly and I put it between my fingers and I just coat it. Essentially, I'm just lubing it up, providing a little bit of moisture for that rubber. And it seems to make it last so much longer. This isn't one of the things that's in the manufacturer's book, but this is just something that I've found seems to work. And then it's all lubed up and waiting for the next time that I'm gonna go to use it. What I've found is as long as I do these few extra steps, that my success rate is just as high as when I'm using my regular canning lids, but my expenses are a little bit lower.